This video is brought to you by PrizePicks. Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into, so let's just get started here. We're going to start with Dr. Napalm, who says this. It's possible we won't get good quarterback play this season, and we'll probably end up with a losing record. So what should we realistically be looking for this year to feel a little optimistic? Would a strong run game, a top 10 defense, and a good wide receiver room be enough to be considered a step in the right direction? At the end of the day, our main focus should be finding the right QB, whether that's through the draft, if we get lucky, or by signing one. I would say, yeah, I don't think the Browns quarterback play is going to be very good this year. Do I think that means that they're guaranteed a losing record? No. It's hard to win a Super Bowl with a bad quarterback. It's possible to go over 500 with a bad quarterback. It's been done plenty of times before, and it will be done plenty of times after. So I wouldn't write off the Browns' ability to be over 500 just because they have a bad quarterback room. I think you can overcome that, right? And if you do end the year with a top 10 defense, with a strong run game and a good wide receiver room and just good receiving options, I do think you leave yourself that ability. Keep in mind, like the Browns won 11 games once with a bad quarterback room. Joe Flacco, P.J. Walker, Deshaun Watson. It's not a quarterback room that anybody would get excited about. They were able to win 11 games with it. Now, obviously, that was a special circumstances. A lot of things went right in that season. But, the idea of going over 500 with that, I think is very achievable. Not likely, but achievable, for this football team. But, yeah, I think if you do end the season with the top 10 defense, with the strong run game, and you feel good about your receiving options, yeah, I think that's exactly where you want to be. If you feel like you're a good landing spot for a quarterback, whether it's through the draft, trade, free agency, however you obtain it, then that's exactly where you want to be, right? Or if you're just a good spot for somebody already on your roster, show some promise. You know what I mean? If that's where you are at the end of the year, then that's a good spot to be in. It's not the best spot. The best spot would be sure about your quarterback's position, as you mentioned. But if you feel like, hey, if we take somebody in, we should be able to have success, right? I would call it the Jared Goff bar, right? Nobody's excited about getting Jared Goff. But if you think you're a team that can win with Jared Goff at the end of this season, then your roster is in the right place, regardless of if you go for Jared Goff or not, right? So that's kind of where I'm basing it, is that, like, using Jared Goff as like a theoretical bar. I'm not necessarily saying we should trade for Jared Goff or anything like that, but if you think that Jared Goff could make the playoffs with this roster, then that's where the roster is in a better place, because Jared Goff's probably amongst one of the worst quarterbacks you can be a serious contender with. No disrespect to Jared Goff, but it just kind of is what it is. Obviously, I mean, he's a good enough quarterback, and I would be happy with at least that from what we've gotten. So I don't want to be too disrespectful to him, but yeah, that's kind of the bar I use in my mind. 97 Murtha says this. Would you be interested in doing a breakdown of Brendan Sorsby, with him likely entering the supplemental draft? It'd be nice to see what traits he has and what he has to work on. Yeah, if he enters the supplemental draft, I will do a breakdown on Brendan Sorsby. I've already done some kind of cursory looks at him through other players and during the season. So yeah, definitely will get a look at Brendan Sorsby, what he did well last season, what he didn't do well. From what I can tell you right now, he's a tools guy, good athlete, legit run threat, really good arm, really talented player. He's been a talented player since his freshman year at Indiana. Putting it all together, he did it a little bit this year. The first 8 games of the college season, he really did put it together. Last 4 wasn't as strong. But yeah, definitely a prospect that would be intriguing for a lot of NFL teams. Obviously comes with the downside of the gambling issues that he got into this year. So we'll see. Shamrod says this: why does legacy media continue to push opinions over reporting at the quarterback situation? Coach Monken has a flat out said there's no change yet, and the media continues to make it a story. The reason why is because it's because since there is no information, right, actual report to be obtained about the quarterback situation right now, right? There's no change in it. There's been no reported change. It's still at the infancy of it. But these legacy media companies, they want content, right? Like that's ultimately something that they want to have is content about the quarterback situation. So in the absence of content, they have their reporters push out more opinions to fill the void for content, right? And that's kind of the cycle that puts that in place, right? I remember, I'm going to age myself here, 20 years ago, when I was like not even a teenager yet, so I'm not aging myself too much, but when I was like 10, 11 years old, first like paying attention to the Brown scene, you really only heard from Tony Grossi when there was news. You really only heard from Terry Pluto back in the day, or Mary Kay when she worked at the Akron Beacon Journal. When there was news to be had, right? When there was something to report, they would basically work on reports until their next report. Now, this was at the same time where newspapers were still a thing and they were employing more people. So they had sports opinion guys, and Terry Pluto was a sports opinion guy, right? So not really a beat reporter, but somebody who will give you his take on it. So you had those guys to give those opinions to feed that beast, and then you had your reporters who would break news stories. And that's when you would hear from Tony. That's where you would hear from Mary Kay. But since everything over the last 20 years in media has consolidated, that's also happened with people like Mary Kay and people like Tony Grossi, where they used to just be able to report, but now they need to also be a columnist. They need to also give opinions. They need to also give reports. Look at Tony Grossi and how that's evolved for him since he's joined ESPN Cleveland, where, again, back when he was on the Plain Dealer, Cleveland.com, you really only heard from Tony when it was camp. He's giving his opinion. He's telling you what he thought it was at practice, but he's not really pushing, opinion pieces all like that often. But then then they got Land on Demand, ESPN 850, and now, Tony Grossi has to do a podcast. He has to make content, right? Instead of beat report, because now there's less division in what's a beat reporter and who's an opinion writer, right? Now it's kind of pushed together where beat reporters are opinion writers and opinion writers have to report on the team. Everybody's doing all the jobs at once, and you even see this with Daryl Ryder, right? Who's the beat reporter for 92.3 The Fan, and he went from, again, you only really heard from Daryl when there was something to report or camp was in set, like there was practice to talk about, he would be reporting for you, right? Now Daryl has a couple of hours on the radio where he gives his opinions on what he thinks the Browns should do and all of that. And that's more of that consolidation, right? Where a beat reporter 20 years ago used to just be a beat reporter, and a radio host used to be a radio host, and an opinion columnist used to be an opinion columnist. Now, all of those guys are one person. The beat reporter is the content creator, is the radio host, is the opinion columnist, all of those things. And that's why it's kind of jarring when legacy media does it, because we still think of Mary Kay as just a beat reporter. That's how you introduce Mary Kay. That's how Mary Kay thinks of herself, as a beat reporter. But the reality is her job has evolved into a content creator as well. That's kind of, I don't know if that's what you asked for. Is a breakdown on just like how media has worked and changed over the last 10, 20 years. But that's why that happens, Chamrod. Why it feels like the legacy media is pushing opinions over reporting is because they need content now, right? Like that's the name of the game, is content. And when you don't have enough reports to make enough content, you're going to have to just throw opinions in there to fill it out. And when you are an organization like a legacy media company that's supposed to just be doing reports, that becomes a problem. You know what I mean? Next one is from Jake Carver. Jake Carver says this: after seeing what Barry's plan for the draft, do you think Monken hire makes more sense, as the Browns provided stability and find their long-term answer at quarterback? I think even before the draft, the Monken hire makes sense from the perspective of the Browns wanting to do two things, right? The Browns wanting to have a coach in there who's more flexible and you feel like has a style that's more useful for young players, which Todd Monken is, and also have somebody who has enough prerequisite experience in the NFL that you feel like they can hit the ground running a bit better than somebody who was not experienced, right? That's the argument for Todd Monken, right? You want a complete offensive overhaul, but the guys who are going to be able to offer that were 30 years old with very little NFL experience. So you didn't want to do that. You could go and hire somebody who's super experienced like Jim Schwartz, but he's a defensive coach. So you split that right down the middle. Todd Monken kind of answers both. And it feels like that's like the perfect compromise from those two positions there. Bryce Holt says this, Q, how do you think Rutenberg evolves the defense? More complex coverages. Seems like Schwartz was cover one, bread and butter for Schwartz. I think they will be more diverse in what they run, right? They're always going to run the basics, 1, 2, 3, cover 1, 2, 3, 4. You know what I mean? You're going to throw some 6 in there, all that stuff, flip it, invert it, make it a 9, all that stuff. You're going to still run it, Tampa 2, the basics. But I think how they disguise those coverages will be a little bit different. And I think what they pair front-wise with coverages will be different. And hopefully that will make them less susceptible to misdirection. We got more questions, but first I got to thank my sponsor, PrizePicks. Hey, let me talk to you about my sponsor for this year, PrizePicks. It's a fun way to win cash while you're watching your favorite teams. Forget complex betting rules. Their app is designed to be incredibly easy to use. Just pick more or less on a few player stats and lock in your lineup. Speaking of, here are my picks for this upcoming NFL season. They have Myles Garrett at 14 sacks here. I think he will get more than 14 sacks. Joe Burrow at 3,875 passing yards. I think he'll be a 4,000-yard passer. I'm going to go with more. They have Derrick Henry at 1,224 yards. I'm going to go less than that. Check to see if PrizePicks is available in your state. You can follow me on the app at KWEN_C to see all of my lineups. Download the PrizePicks app today. Play $5 and get $50 in lineups when you download the app using the link in the description. Edward Bartell with the next question says this. Hey, Q, I don't recall seeing that Mason Graham had a fully cracked rib last season. He hurt it against Tennessee, fully broke it against San Francisco. It's actually the reverse. He hurt it versus San Francisco, broke it versus Tennessee. Knowing he was hurt in the same game that took out Malik, yet managed to perform at a high level, does that elevate your already high assessment of him as a foundational player for this team in the coming years? First, I learned this injury was in yesterday's press availability. Yeah, I think that's when they finally told us that happened. Again, if an injury is not going to keep somebody out or threaten to keep somebody out, then they don't really have to tell us. So that's kind of how that one flies under the radar. But yeah, obviously it makes me think highly. I think I did a video that released Friday afternoon. So make sure you go check that out. Praising Mason Graham and talking about what he did those 4 weeks after the bye and before he broke his ribs. Really encouraging stuff there. Like Mason was playing at a really high level. And continued to play at a high level, even after breaking his ribs, which I think is very impressive. So another offseason for him, man. Another year of just getting stronger for him. And then if he can stay healthy, I think he's going to really shut some people up in the upcoming years for sure. I like Mason Graham a lot from what we've seen. The next question comes from Green Eye Rogue, who says, Q, okay, straight from the crazy files. Let's get it. Let's say your prediction of unimpressive quarterback play from the current room becomes a reality, and AB starts gearing up to make a play in 2027. Given the otherwise well-balanced team AB has put together over the last few years, do you think it's possible the Browns can make a play for Burrow? He'll be eligible for a trade. He's an Ohio kid, and he'd be coming to a better balanced team with the top defense and an owner willing to spend money to acquire talent. I know it's unlikely, but do you think it's possible, and at what odds? Thanks for bringing some sanity to silly season. It's pretty much impossible. I don't see the Cincinnati Bengals ever trading Joe Burrow to the Cleveland Browns under any circumstance. And to understand that, you need to know that the Browns family, they own the Cincinnati Bengals kind of out of spite from Art Modell in Cleveland. So, like, we might not have that much beef with Cincinnati. I think some Browns fans get annoyed by Cincinnati fans, but like we don't have that kind of beef with them. But the Brown family does have that beef with Cleveland. They actually do hate the Browns, and they would never trade Joe Burrow to Cleveland. They would never do that. It would take a lot of world-changing events in order to force that one out, including the Bengals having to sell the team, right? Like somebody else other than the Brown family would have to own the team by then in order for that to happen. And that's not going to happen in the time before next offseason, right? Like even if the Bengals sell, it's like a 2-year process. So not a possibility at all. But I like where your head is. So no, we're not going to get Joe Burrow. We're not going to get Lamar Jackson, right? Even though Lamar Jackson is more possible than Joe Burrow. It's not very possible at all. It's like 0.1% instead of 0, but it's more possible than Joe Burrow. But I like where your head is from the perspective of, yeah, we might have to trade for somebody. Yeah, we might have to ask some questions that feel stupid, but you never know what answer you're going to get about who's going to be available and what you're willing to do, you know? So, no, I don't think we ever get Joe Burrow. But the Browns need to knock on every door to see how they can solve this quarterback problem because they never know which one's going to answer. So, yeah. Don't think the Joe Burrow thing is going to happen, but, you know, hey, look, if they try and get laughed at, I think it's a worthwhile thing to try. It's not going to happen, though. The next question comes from Fez. Fez says this: what are your thoughts on Monken's statement about the development of Shedeur regarding progression and timing? This is something that should make us feel more confident in his future. Yes. I read that quote and I was like, okay, that's something I wanted to see with Shedeur, right? The biggest thing, there are a number of things that Shedeur is going to have to fix to get where he wants to at quarterback. But there are a couple of things that I feel like are the most needed right now. The first thing Shedeur needs to improve at is his understanding of situational football. Last year, there were too many times where Shedeur demonstrated a poor understanding of situational football. I talk about this. There was that play in his first game where Jerry Jeudy is open for like an out. Like there's stuff like that happens all the time with Shedeur. Where like the proper decision to make here with the game being in the situation that it is X, but Shedeur went with something else. He needs to drastically improve his understanding of situational football, because that will get him benched faster than anything. And if he gets benched, he's not going to be able to improve. So that's the first thing, right? If you get the opportunity, he has to be much better at situational football, especially if he's planning on playing when the Browns are still in like legitimate playoff contention. The second thing Shedeur has to improve the most is kind of related to that, but it's how he goes through plays. I appreciate the part of Shedeur that is a playmaker. And when he breaks the pocket, I think there is something nice there, right? He has the ability to anticipate angles and windows when he's breaking the pocket, and that leads to a lot of beautiful throws from Shedeur. What Shedeur does struggle with is being disciplined through his progressions as a quarterback. Too many times where Shedeur, I think I'd use this analogy with Cam Ward. But too many times where if you show Shedeur a little bit of candy, he takes the candy, right? Oh, you give him a little bit of an intriguing pre-snap look one-on-one, he'll throw right into double coverage if you disguise it because he wants that one-on-one matchup too bad. He's got to be more disciplined with his approach to progressions, and that means he has to be more okay as a quarterback doing the boring stuff, right? We know that he could do the spectacular play. Let's just see him do the boring stuff. It's funny because him and Cam Ward came out in the same class, and for different reasons, they are two different versions of the same thing. Because Cam Ward has this same exact issue too. It's just Cam has the kind of arm strength to get away with it in the NFL level, where Shedeur does not have the kind of arm talent to get away with some of the decisions he likes to make. So he's going to have to fix this. Cam might be able to get away with not fixing this. Shedeur, he's going to have to fix this to be a quarterback in the NFL. So hearing that he's getting better at the development and the progressions of it, and if you see, Todd raving about his situational football, that's a really good sign, because that's the stuff that he really does need to get better at. If he gets better at that, he'll at least be able to stay on the field when he plays. And if he stays on the field, he'll be able to get better at the other stuff, right? The pocket awareness, the taking sacks, accuracy, throw to throw. He'll be able to get better at those things if he gets more time. He'll be able to get better at, making better, being more disciplined in his progressions if he gets more reps. But if he can't get a better grasp on situational football, then he's not going to play, and that's going to be a problem, right, for his development at least. Next one comes from Shade of Red, who says this: what's the minimum amount of wins / progress or playoff success? Ooh, wow. We'd have to reach for me to call this season a success. I don't know if there's an amount of wins there. What I will say is, if the Browns are in a position to where they are a good landing spot for a quarterback, if that's how we legitimately feel about this team, then I would say that's a success. Even more so if we have a path to a legitimate quarterback somehow, I would call it a success. If we're looking for wins, I think they're clearly aiming to win more than 6 games. We'll see if they can get that. But I think that's very clear that they're aiming to win that. You want the Browns to be a respectable team this year. They might not be world beaters, but they should be respectable. That's my thoughts. Let me know your questions down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.